Hi, everyone. My name is Stella Guan. I am the founder and CEO of Path Unbound, a design school. Today, we're excited to announce a new discussion show called Design Uncensored. In this show, we're going to primarily talk to designer Kerry McPhearson about design issues that surrounding the industries that we have passionate opinions about, and hopefully provide some valuable insights to the design community. Kerry is a passionate and very talented product designer who used to go to a boot camp and transition his career successfully to design. And he has kindly agreed to come back to us, having done a previous episode with us in another show. So thank you so much for your time, Kerry. How are you doing today?
I am doing pretty well. Thank you for having me, Stella.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in this first episode, we discussed before, we want to talk a little bit about design culture, design hiring, and design maturity. There's a lot to unpack here because I think nowadays we're seeing more and more companies have high requirements for designers when they hire them, right? They want software competence, of course. They want you to have soft skills. They want you to have business skills. They want you to sometimes code. So there are a lot to be expected here. And then a lot of designers, especially junior designers, are very frustrated because obviously they have a lot to offer, but at the same time, they feel like it's hard to measure up to all the expectations. So I think it's time for us to look at it from the other side, because if you're asking for something, you have to kind of have the qualities that you're looking for to that candidates are looking for to back it up. So it brings us to an interesting questions that you discovered on LinkedIn. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What did you see being raised as a question?
Definitely. So there's this woman named Catalina. She is a systems designer. So she deals with like design systems and infrastructure. And she posted this interesting post on LinkedIn asking questions on, things that are bugging her within the design industry. So for example, why are employees expecting companies to have experience from A to Z in their, projects when in reality it's only like A to C or something, right? Why are people expecting just a multitude of things from all these different candidates? Why is design education this way? And of course, there were some managers who responded to that post, but their post was more of like a kind of virtual signaling or kind of speaking to Morse code in a sense, and they weren't necessarily being honest about like the state of affairs in the industries and how they change, or how they would combat, right, those
Yeah.
certain things as well. So
Yeah. It's interesting because we don't often look inward. We only look outward and
yeah,
ask for what we want, and that's cool. But we need to improve ourselves before it's sort of like dating, right? Like if you're shooting out of your leagues, you're not going to get good results. So, which kind of makes me think, okay, so we need to kind of start defining what design culture means. What does it mean to you?
um, I think there's so many nuances, and there's just so many different organizations focusing on different things and that have different goals. But I think if a design culture, bar none, is just a group of problem solvers. Like tools, methods, and like none of that stuff really matters at the end of the day. It's people getting together to help the company, right? Solve business problems for their users, for their internal employees as well. And that could be done in myriads of different ways. I think when you miss that point of solving problems, or you're just a person who just takes orders from upper management, then that's when you fall into a bad culture, right? Because now all you're doing is production work. As a matter of fact, I've heard this about like FANG companies on some teams. And, Dylan, the guy that you interview, he said to our team one day that if our focus is not on improving a product, then we're not holding ourselves accountable to our own practices and processes. And I think a really great design team, a really great design culture, they're focused on improving something. And sometimes it has nothing to do with design, right? It might be with the company onboarding. It might be with internally, right? Things that are going on in the company so it can be more streamlined and add more revenue. So, in my opinion, that's what a design culture is: a group of problem solvers trying to get to an end goal with the skill sets that they have.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting to me, because I feel like, if you're embedded in an organization, you're always going to have these nuanced hierarchies between yourself, your team, and other teams in the bigger organization. Where do you fit in? I think obviously it comes from top down, because if you have a CEO that doesn't even believe in the value of design, then I think it's pretty hard for you to build a design culture no matter how hard you try. But at the same time, if you have someone who's open minded at the top, you still need someone in middle management who does the active work to build that, to really help the business, and then kind of like advocate for the culture, as well, and like you said, establish those like systems, tools, and those that are like at the basic baseline level. So how do you so let's say you have a design culture, right? You do have a baseline of it, but then we definitely have hierarchy. So, well, I wouldn't say hierarchies, more like maturity. So we tend to like companies that are a bit more mature if we want to join a company, because we have a better environment to thrive in. What do you think are the benchmarks of maturity in terms of the design culture?
That is a really good question. And this is just going off of observation. This is pretty much my opinion, but I think kind of the benchmarks of high maturity doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the high number of head count that you have, right, on the team. But I think you have like really dedicated roles on the team, even if you have like a team of 20 designers. So you have someone focusing on information architecture, you have someone focusing on design systems and infrastructures, right, and documentation. You have another person focusing on design ops. You have another person focusing on service design. You might have someone who is focusing on internal tools, right, for the employees, or building infrastructure for the developers so they can ship stuff faster to help out the design team. So you have all these different nuanced roles and all these different people, instead of folks who are just, doing production work, right, and just shipping things. Now it's a little bit more focused and strategic. I think you have managers who, in these mature organizations, they have like charts, right, of like list on like different levels. So level one all the way up to level six, or junior designer all the way up to principal designer. And they have some kind of framework or something in place, right, to help their team grow. I think it's also, speaking of managers, just really good leadership overall, in my opinion. I think leadership is people that are steering the strategy, but they have vision and purpose for their team. So, oh, this is where the business is going, right? This is where I want my team to go. These are the things that I want my team to know, right, about where the business is going. I want them to set OKRs. I want them to do X, Y, and Z. And I think one other thing, and this is going to be the last thing I touch upon, I think it's when you have a really mature design org, and there's always going to be problems at every company you go to, but I think it's this thing where everyone looks at the design team and the leadership team with reverence, right? Even if it is the CEO or someone else that's coming in that doesn't know anything about design. Because when you're having these conversations with a designer, you're not talking about design at all. And of course, it takes a skill. Of course, every team member is not going to be able to have it. But when you're talking to like principal, right, and people in leadership and management, that's pretty much the foundation that they have. So just to recap, I think really good nuanced roles, right? That's not just doing the work, but pushing the company as a whole forward. Really good vision for the team. So how should they go, right? And what should their strategy be? And then just really great leadership as well on pushing things, and a really great company that has reverence and respect. One more thing I want to touch upon is just leadership, being able to bring a junior person into that organization and they just fit so well. Is they're not out of place, right? Like how it is at current companies right now, and how they can really ramp that person up super fast because they're giving them the resources and the tools and everything they need to be successful, even if a newer designer comes on track. So that's my opinion of a really mature design organization.
Yeah, it's so amazing you mentioned that last bit. No, I think everything it's pretty much gold that you said. That, but the last bit I think is probably more interested in to our audience, because imagine you going in as a junior. You need a lot of mentorships. You need handholding. That's to be expected. But if you come into an organization that isn't equipped to do that, then you're kind of, it's kind of like, okay, you sign up for a class to to learn how to swim. And
Yeah.
then they tell you to just jump in and swim, right? Would you be
Right.
comfortable with that? I wouldn't be comfortable with that. I would want a coach alongside me and make sure I'm safe, and then I learn how to swim. So I think that one, it's spot on. And then the first one you mentioned, it's like, it has more to do with organizational management. So it isn't really that hard if a company is already doing well in organizational management. Of course, we need design leaders to come in, at least as a consultant, to make sure that when they do those, like organization, org charts, how to arrange those roles, we have professional input, which honestly, we could be really writing those down into a book. So do you have some real life examples that you could give us in your day to day, for example, that shows a company is actually doing a good job in design culture and maturity? Anything recently happened?
Um, I think I think one thing with culture and maturity is Dropbox. I One thing about Dropbox, because a lot of people harp on this on LinkedIn all the time. UX job postings suck. They're not specific, right? They're not what
Right.
someone wants. But with Dropbox, I've been super impressed. And if you haven't, Stella, please check it out and like use
Yeah.
it as an example on your
Uh-huh.
blog. Like take screenshots, but they have like for different roles, even though they are probably looking for the best designer because they are a well established organization, they just have these different teams and they have different requirements and they're really specific about what they want. So for example, this will be a role for content browser, right? I'm just making up something because they have these weird names for these roles.
Right.
And for this role, you need to be a person that's lean on process. You need to
Uh-huh.
be a person that's used to working really deep with developers, right? Having an understanding of React. You need to learn how to go. I mean, you need to be a person that can go broad before going deep into a problem, right? Then there might be another role. You need to have really sharp visual skills. You need to have that experience working with people in branding. I mean, brand and marketing, right? And speaking that language, having that understanding of product marketing, having an understanding of copywriting, right? And content design. This role is creating templates in a sense. So you kind of need to understand that world. And I'm just completely blown away by that because a lot of job postings don't necessarily have that. And I think it starts right there, right? With having that understanding on what you want for different roles in a sense. And the best companies that I've seen is like they have people that have these certain superpowers and they can place them on these different teams, right? So for example,
Mhm.
I think Headspace, in my opinion, are super good at that. Even though their job postings are kind of generic, still,
Mhm.
I think the people that they have on their teams, like they have like an art background. When you see the way that Headspace is designed, right, you need a certain kind of product designer to create that kind of experience, right? Not just for fitness and wellness, but something that's kind of giving like that kind of fairy tale kind of storybook, Nickelodeon, right, kind of design that they
Yeah.
sense. And there's a reason why they're pulling it off well because they have those kind of product designers for that kind of stuff. So I think, in my opinion, companies that do it well, that have really good demonstration of really good like design organizations being ran, they can fit the right designers in on the right roles on the right team, and they're cognizant of that instead of just throwing someone in a role, right? They're building those foundations up to that point where you can get that kind of nuance within each singular role. So yeah.
It's so cool that it, because they're so good, you even remember them just by
Yeah.
browsing them casually, on LinkedIn. And I agree, because if you see those job descriptions, and job descriptions are not created equal, honestly, there are a lot of them. When you see them, you're just like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't even know who they're hiring for. And
Yeah.
my personal experience is in one of the previous companies that I worked at, they were trying to hire a hybrid designer and project manager, which probably never happens. It pretty much never happens. So, however, unfortunately, because of the lack of design maturity, in the organization, they did not take our feedback into place when they posted the job. And guess what? They didn't hire anyone because no one see themselves fitting into two very, very different role and still willing to, I guess, like move forward. So that brings us to the next question, I guess, like point of discussion is, do you have any horror stories of companies that are just so dysfunctional in terms of design culture or design maturity that everything just fell apart?
Yeah, I do. I think that it's kind of bigger, right, than just design, because now a lot of design teams are integrated on product teams, and when you have that, integration, sometimes it could be a thing where, and I actually read this interesting post on Quora on like a side note about developers that are outsourced, like the issues with that. And Stella, I'll probably send it to you after this call.
Yeah.
But sometimes you could be thrown on a team where you have developers that are outsourced and they never work with a product designer a day in their life. Sometimes when people are hiring for these other teams that your designers are working with, it could be this thing where their hiring is different. Their standards are different. So they might be hiring PMs that don't know how to look for actual, good problems, right? And that try to art direct designers. They might be hiring developers that, are having a hard time working with designers, right? Even though it's just our job, right, to work with developers and kind of bridge that gap, it might be a thing where they might be outsourced and English is not their first language and there's a cultural barrier happening and your designer is not shipping at all. And I don't care if they're the best designer. If you have an organization like that, you're just not going to be successful, to be honest. There might be a thing where leadership is not paying or not providing, right, the market rate and the salary rate for like managers and other people. And these are the situations that I've personally been in where you have that and you encounter those things. Or it might be an organization where you're reporting to like a VP a product, or you're reporting to someone that has nothing to do with design, so now they just can't help you, right, in a sense. So now that you're having this fallout with PMs giving you tickets that are not great, you have developers where you're not speaking the same language, so when they're shipping your stuff, it's completely wrong and it's very costly for the company, right? That's, in my opinion, a bad sign of it. And I think these are things that people don't talk about on LinkedIn, which I'm shocked about, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of frustrated at it, because design is not in a sandbox, right? It is other teams and other different people kind of affecting the way that you ship. And when you have these things where there's a communication breakdown and other folks are not hiring, right, the top talent that you want to hire, it doesn't matter how many talented people you have if the PMs are horrible to work with, the developers are horrible to work with, right, the leadership team is really horrible to work with, and a lot of things, a lot of accomplishments, right, are just kind of budget based. I mean, a lot of like getting promoted, right, is budget based versus merit based. Then that just
Yep.
really becomes a problem. So I don't think it's necessarily on a design team. I think it's on a company itself, but at the same time, it's up to that leader to like mitigate that stuff. See if it's worth their time, right? When they're coming in, and not only that, it's up to them to go to the CEO and say this, because Dylan did this, by the way. Hey,
Oh,
I'm already going to hire amazing design people. I already have that covered. Let's talk about the problems that you want to solve. I think when you go to a founder of a company, right, you go to a leadership team, they can respect you more because now you're really seeing their problems, right? And how you're going to solve it. And then you're communicating as a leader. This is the vision that I have for my design team, and this is how we're going to solve those problems. These are the OKRs that we're going to set, right? This is the kind of talent that I want to break in, and blah, blah, blah. But I guarantee you, a lot of leaders probably don't do that. And I guarantee you, once again, this is something that a lot of people are not talking about. So, Stella, I want to mention one thing on this call to anyone that's listening, and I'm probably for the remainder of our podcast that we have, I'm going to keep saying this. We can't do anything about the past. We can't do anything about people that are in leadership right now, and they're just used to the status quo and used to a certain way of like governing a team, right? Building a team and all of that. So people that started in 2020 all the way up, I just challenge you to be better leaders of tomorrow. Don't make that excuse saying, oh, well, this is how things have always been. Don't do that. If you want to go into a leadership position just because you want to get ahead in your career, don't do it at all. It's not for you. But if you really want to build teams, if you really want to help people grow and learn and help them do their best work, then by all means go into it, because we need more than ever. We need that right now.